This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
I put my life on hold. Like everything I did, if I could buy groceries, when I could go to sleep, when I could wake up, who I could hang out with, if I could talk on the phone, if I could go on vacation, like if I wanted to, have a certain type of meal, like everything I did was based on my mother. If I could shower.
This is the Heart of Hospice podcast with Helen Bauer. Today's guest, Christina Keys of caregiving.com, turned her hospice caregiving experience into a career filled with meaning and purpose. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, the Heart of Hospice podcast is here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
This episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast is sponsored by the Tree of Life Conference by International Doula Life Movement. Join IDLM at the Tree of Life Conference in San Antonio, Texas, November 1st through the 4th. The Tree of Life Conference is more than just workshops and seminars. It's an opportunity to connect, learn, and renew your commitment to compassionate care. Attendees will hear from expert speakers like End of Life educator Barbara Carnes and Death Deck co-creator Lisa Paul. Visit internationaldoulalifemovement.com for more details. This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services can help. Our team of experienced hospice navigators is here to offer one-on-one consulting sessions by phone or video. You can book a complimentary 30-minute session when you need general information, or book a 60-minute session when you have in-depth questions or need to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. Visit theheartofhospice.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
Hey, this is Helen. I want to let you know that my guest for this episode, Christina Keys, is no longer affiliated with caregiving.com. If you'd like more information about the work Christina is doing to support caregivers now, you can visit ChristinaKeys.com. Today's guest has an amazing story, one that's going to resonate with you whether you are an unpaid family caregiver or a hospice and end-of-life worker. Christina Keys is my guest today. Christina will tell you that she had a successful career. She was traveling. She was in good shape financially. She was doing great when her mother had a life-changing stroke in 2013. Christina went instantly from career woman to caregiver. And within 3 years of starting that caregiving journey for her mom, she found herself financially, emotionally, mentally, and physically bankrupt. Christina was the caregiver for her mom from 2013 until December of 2022 when her mother passed away on hospice care. Christina also still helps with the care of her ex-boyfriend, whom she became a caregiver for back in 2019. And now she works to make sure that caregivers everywhere feel seen, heard, valued, and appreciated, and that they never feel like they're alone. Christina is the director of community growth for caregiving.com. Caregiving.com is an organization who's making positive changes for caregivers in cities all across the United States. You can access caregiving resources and see how they can help you at caregiving.com. It's a great organization. You're going to hear some details today in my interview with Christina. A lot of openness, raw vulnerability when she talks about her caregiving experience and what she had to learn. or I guess as she would say, what she got to learn, because she views her experience with her mother as something that was a gift to her. She describes caregiving as building a plane while you're flying it without any tools or an instruction manual. And I think a lot of caregivers can relate to that scenario. Christina also has a special spin to her caregiving story that I think is really valuable, that I hope so many of you that need to hear it hear. Christina was abused by her mom when she was a kid, and Christina had to learn how to care for her mother as an adult. She believes that she couldn't have been a full-time caregiver without the support that she had from the paid caregivers that she hired. And she'll tell you how her caregiving experience almost cost her her own life due to the stress and the wear and tear on her personally. She'll tell you that she realizes how different her life was after her caregiving experience with her mom was over with. And she had to rediscover herself as a new person after her mother died. So you're going to hear all the details of this really powerful story. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with my guest, Christina Keys. Christina, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
It's good to be here, Helen. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. We've had an introduction call and had a lot of time to get to know each other. You've got a great story, and we kind of commiserated. We had a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
But for my listeners to get to know you a little bit, I'm going to ask you a question that I didn't already send you. So I like this part of the interview. It's a little surprise.
Oh, okay.
What are 3 of your caregiving superpowers?
3 of my caregiving superpowers. Today, they are understanding that any normal that I knew before is not my normal now. And being able to adapt to change. And supposedly I know how to do the Heimlich at 60 miles an hour too. So, yeah.
I'm afraid to ask about that last one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Had to perform that once. I also had to revive my mother at, 60 miles an hour. So,
Oh, my
that's how I
word.
roll.
So but it's interesting. You used a word that I wasn't expecting. You said today.
Yeah.
Those are your caregiving superpowers today. That's interesting.
Right.
So do you think they change from day to day, or you're editing them all the time?
Well, I think I had no superpowers before, and I constantly thought that I was failing before. If you would have asked me what my superpowers were before, I would have said, I have none. I'm failing as a caregiver on a daily basis, which I think a lot of caregivers feel that way. And it took me a long time to realize that I'm not failing. I'm kind of handling it like a badass, even if I do feel like I'm failing.
Good for you. That's awesome.
And I think it's not just me, it's every caregiver. So,
Oh, yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think when it comes to caregiving, that we're outperforming the image of ourselves every single day. Every single day.
Right. I think if every caregiver stopped to think who they were before caregiving and who they are now, I think they would, if they really took a look at that, they would see that they are such a stronger and more talented person than they ever thought they could be before they started caregiving.
Yeah. We don't get everything right. We're imperfect. But I don't think a caregiving journey is really supposed to be squeaky clean, perfect without any screw ups. I've never heard of one. That's like saying you were a perfect parent and you never made any mistakes with your kids. Every caregiver is going to make mistakes.
Right. I couldn't relate to a caregiver who had that kind of care journey, but I haven't run across one yet. So
right. We're all just humanly making our way through this experience. Yeah. So your caregiving story has some twists and turns. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me your story. How did you get to this place?
Well, I in 2013, my mother had a life-changing stroke. They gave her 1% chance to live. And it was March 16th of 2013 at 3:42 p.m. My mother was only 62 years old. She passed out. She hit her head on the couch, the end of the couch, and she had a stroke. When I showed up at the hospital, she was hooked up to life support. They gave her 1% chance to live. She bled out for 12 days. She was in ICU for 30 days, in the hospital for over 4 months. I lived with her in that hospital. And when I say lived with her, I lived out of a suitcase, slept in that hospital chair that we've all slept in many, many times. I would go home once a week to take a shower. I smelled fabulous, by the way.
Lovely.
And I kept asking everybody in that hospital, like, how do I do this? Because I had never had children. I was in tech, I mean, I didn't know how to caregive. I didn't know how to. I had nieces and nephews, but not. I didn't know how to do that. And even the times I was tired, I would say, "Hey, can I record this?" Because I knew I needed to comprehend whatever they had to say, and really, I didn't get much information. They let me wheel my mother out of that hospital with her being paralyzed on one side, not knowing how to take care of somebody. And they gave me a list of, it was a list of in home caregiving places and senior living places, but they didn't tell me that in home care was not covered by insurance. I thought we were doing great. I mean, my mother was an executive at Boeing for many years. She had like the highest clearance in aerospace on the military side you can get. She was amazing. She had a great 401k. She had a great pension. I was in tech making over 100 grand a year. I mean, I had a great 401k. I wheeled her out of there thinking we're going to be fine. Well, within a year and a half, we had gone from upper middle class to like poverty level, and I'm walking into the food banks, because I was paying for my mom's care. We had gone through almost $300,000, cleared out my 401k, her 401k. I was paying for her care. And there was a lot of care to be paid for. We were paying out of pocket, modifications to the house so she could get her wheelchair. You just don't think about things like how much are adult briefs going to cost? How much are all the Clorox wipes going to cost? Because now they've got a compromised immune system. And yeah, so it was quite the journey and the learning curve of it all. I mean, I remember one of my Facebook memories came up, and when she first came home. This is how much I didn't know about caregiving. Um, it said, does anybody know if they have such thing as like babysitters, but for adults? I didn't even know it was called a caregiver. And here I was a caregiver.
So that
right?
was your post on
That
Facebook?
was my post.
Was to throw that
Yes.
question in search of somebody
I
to take
didn't
care of
know.
a grown adult.
It was called, I didn't know it was called a caregiver.
Yeah.
And here I was going to be a caregiver. And I had been living in the hospital with my mother. Like, I remember they were trying to teach her how to talk with these like stick figure things, because she had to relearn how to talk. And I had this idea to print a bunch of pictures of her life and make flashcards out of those. I had somebody pick them up from the photo place, like 300 pictures of her life, because I knew love was going to motivate her. Right. And what's one of the biggest things that makes you a caregiver? Like, we step in because of love. Right. And here I am. I have this like solid caregiver idea, an act of love on how to teach my mom how to actually talk. And it was successful. And I still didn't know I was a caregiver.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of people are in that situation. They don't understand they're a caregiver. Right. And it also had me in this place of, I heard somebody describe it once as trying to fly a plane while you're building a plane without a toolbox and without any instruction manual. And that's kind of like what caregiving is like, being thrown into caregiving. And I had no idea how to do it. I had no idea how. My mom didn't know how to do it. She had the stroke. She was paralyzed on the one side. We were just figuring out as we went along. And it was very interesting because my mother, she was my abuser most of my life, and so I had, done enough therapy and all of this stuff to where I had set all these boundaries, and we had a great relationship by the time, before she had her stroke. Well, then she had her stroke, And you cannot set boundaries with somebody who has cognitive issues, right? You can't just, if they're mean to you, just walk out the door, and the stress of caregiving and the stress of, watching my mother almost die. And I think that sort of gives us this almost like PTSD, like they're going to die any minute, and, that anticipatory grief type stuff. It made it so by 2017, I was told by the doctors I myself had 6 months to live. So, yeah, my body was literally shutting down, and it was not good.
Yeah. Caregiving comes with a lot of wear and tear.
Mm-hmm.
So if you'll allow me, I want to touch back a little more detailed into something that you mentioned about you and your mom and your relationship, and she was abusive to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind talking about that some, because we know that there are people who are providing care for somebody they don't even like.
Right.
Somebody
Yeah.
who was abusive, an ex-spouse, somebody who has been incarcerated, somebody that you've been disconnected from for years. They don't necessarily like them. They don't even love them, but they're still providing care, and they are finding that strength within themselves to sort of bridge over all this crap
Right.
that has been going on in a relationship. How did that history with your mother affect your willingness and your caregiving role?
Well, my mother, I had to go through a lot of learning how to forgive my mother. And I don't know if I was ever able to forgive my mother as a mother, but I was able to forgive her as a woman, if that makes sense.
Yes,
first.
as a person.
Yeah, as a person. And I kind of had to be in this place of, she might not be able to be a good mom, but I really want to be a good daughter. The thing is during that care journey, there was times of, oh my gosh, it was almost like when she was having her like cognitive issues, she was actually nicer. And in between, she was like, she once said to me when she was lucid, she said, Tina, I'm sorry I'm so mean to you when you're here sometimes. But the thing is I get so angry about my life and all the independence I've lost, and that I can't go anywhere or do anything. And I've nobody to take it out on. And the thing is like, I can take it out on you, and I know you'll keep coming back. Well, as messed up as that is, I get it, because what do we all do when we have energy and we're angry? We might be really angry about something really huge, but we blow up that we've lost our keys. We redirect that anger sometime. And she knew no matter what, I would come back, And so it was tough. I had to learn. It's interesting because people who are not caregivers give you the I'm just going to say, I think, give you the stupidest advice. And I'm just going to be honest.
It's true.
They would say to me, you just need to set boundaries. Okay. You cannot set boundaries with somebody with memory issues. You can't set boundaries with somebody who, has speaking issues. You have to set boundaries with yourself. Right. And so I had to do that. And I remember one time I was at her house, and it was a Tuesday, and she just decided she didn't want me there. And, she had an audience because the PT person was there. A new PT person was there.
Of course.
She was having one of those days that, she didn't want me in her house. And I had to come sort her meds, and so I'm sitting down sorting her meds. She's like, what are you doing here? And the whole thing stemmed from, I had set up PT and told her, Mom, you really need to do PT. And she didn't want to do PT, right? Physical therapy. She didn't want to. So I was now the bad guy. She hated me. It was over, right? But I needed to sort her meds, right? And so I come over to her house. I'm sorting her meds, and she's yelling at me in front of the PT person. What are you doing here? And I'm like, Mom, I need to sort your meds. And she's like, I don't want you here. And she's yelling at me. And I'm like, well, I'm going to sort your meds, whether you want me here or not. You're out of medication. Like, if I could wait a day, I would, but I cannot. And she's like, I'm calling the police. I'm like, well, go ahead and call the police. And she's yelling this in front of like the PT person.
Oh,
And
man.
I'm like, if it bothers you to see me in the same room, I'll take it into the spare room. So I take all the medication stuff and set it up in the spare room. And then she tells the PT, she rolls in, and she's yelling at me. Like, I'm like, Mom, I'm not leaving until your meds are done. So you can be as angry at me as you want, but I need to do that. Right. And then I just needed to be, and it was so, for me, I could have yelled at her. I could have done all these things and try to set boundaries. I'm not, then fine, you won't get your meds. I can't do, I'm a caregiver. I
Right.
can't do that, puts her in danger. But for me, I have to like set those boundaries for myself of like, okay, I need to do this. And then I need to like, there's two churches that are from at my mom's house. There's one on this side and there's one on this side. And I call them the crying rooms because I just like sit in the parking lot. And I used to sit in the parking lot before and after and just either cry or yell or just, I don't know, whatever I needed to do.
Yeah. To vent.
I spent quite a few years having no contact with my mother, quite a few years in therapy, quite a few years just taking care of myself. And I mean, I left home when I was 15, and what it felt like I was all of those years that I worked so hard, to create a life for myself and not feel like that's a child only a mother can love. And my mother didn't even love me, like all that mind stuff that comes along when you're in an abusive relationship, especially when it's blood or family, whatever. I'm sure social worker can have a field day with this topic, right? But,
Right.
it felt like I didn't have a chance to escape it anymore. And I'm sure that anybody who is caring for somebody who was once their abuser, I'm sure they worked hard to set boundaries or to get away from that person or to change the way they reacted to that person. And then when they get into a place of having to be their caregiver or choosing, nobody has to be. If you're listening, you never have to be anybody's caregiver. Literally, even if they gave birth to you, you do not have to be their caregiver. It is a choice they make. We make, right? So I'm sure they feel like I did, which was, God, all that work. And now here I am back having to take this abuse. But here's the deal for me, it was a chance for me to learn a different level of self-respect, a different level of boundaries, because before I was setting boundaries with her, now I'm setting boundaries with me. And that was something I needed to learn. And so, yeah, it was a different level of growth. So, and I say this all the time, as traumatic as caregiving was, I learned like a whole new level of love. I learned a whole new level about who I was. There were so many things that like, I don't know where I would have got all of these amazing things that I got from caregiving if I wouldn't have been a caregiver. Like I would do it again and again and again, regardless of if it was with my mother who was my abuser, right? I would do it again, even if I knew ahead of time that it was going to be that bad. I'd be like, all right, I'm signing up because good stuff came out of it, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of gifts that come in with all the ball of crapola that comes with it.
Yeah.
Did you have help? Were you your mother's only caregiver?
So I hired in-home caregivers. I hired privately. A couple times I hired an agency. I had to have quite a bit of care for her, so I couldn't always afford an agency. My sister occasionally came down on the weekends, to maybe spend the night one night, but every few months or so. But sometimes she would take a year off from doing that, whatever. I don't know. That was it. And I was the only one who paid for anything. Nobody in my family even contributed $1, right? I was the only one who paid for anything. And I had literally contributed over the almost 10 years that I cared for Mom. Out of pocket, it was over $300,000. And then with, I did an interview, I can't remember if it was Forbes or Fortune magazine, but she had calculated between my lost wages, the time I had given and the cash I'd put in, and it wound up being over $834,000. And yeah, so yeah, it was it was me. But here's the deal. I could not have done it without the caregivers that I hired. And here's why. And for anybody that's listening, I'm sure that you all have had this. My mother was resistant to caregivers. Nope, I don't want anybody in the house. I don't want anybody to, nope, nobody's coming. Even after we had had so many successful people there,
Yeah.
she just wanted me. She didn't want anybody else, but it wasn't good for her. And it wasn't good for me to just, it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for her. And I'll tell you why is because she needed somebody other than just me. Because I was becoming more and more of a punching bag, and it was more and more more and more times that she was saying no, because the role reversal. Now I was the mom, and she didn't like that. And so she needed that, even if the caregiver was not even just to give me respite, just for her to have social interaction other than me, So I don't know how I would have done it without the caregivers that we had. And a lot of those caregivers became like family. I mean, they really, really did. Some of them spent, holidays with us. And one of them, when my mother passed, she was there with me, during a lot of the hospice journey. And when the funeral happened, we had a private viewing for the family, and we allowed her in that private viewing because she was family. And she started out as a caregiver we hired from a Facebook ad.
And that may not sound like a big deal, but when you are plunged as a paid caregiver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking from the perspective of the person that you hired, when you're plunged into the middle of these people's personal lives, it's intimate, and you do oftentimes function inside areas where really only family is permitted.
Right.
And so
right.
It does feel very personal. So you pretty much, for all intents and purposes, you were a solo caregiver and a solo decision maker.
Oh, absolutely. I was a solo decision maker.
Yeah. Did your mom ever tell you, I don't need any help? Not just that she didn't want a hired caregiver, but that she didn't want any help? Or did she have realistic expectations about her abilities and how she could manage things?
Oh, she always said she didn't need any help, but
Yeah.
But when she was funny. My mother was a very independent woman. She was an amazing woman. And I came in one day, and that woman could run circles around me even in her wheelchair, right? I came in one day, she's in the back. She's got a one of those I don't even know what it is, some sort of power saw. She's building a planter box. She has one arm. From her wheelchair. She's, I'm like, Ma, what are you doing? And then another time I come in, she has and remember, she is in a wheelchair. She cannot stand, she cannot walk, and she's only got one arm, right? Because the other one's completely paralyzed. On the right side, she's completely paralyzed. I come in, she has the couch completely turned over, a full-size couch.
What?
And my mother was a petite woman. She's tiny like you, right? She has the couch completely turned over. I'm like, Ma, what are you doing? She's like, I'm making sure I clean the dust from underneath the couch. I'm like, yeah. So, and
Oh
and
my
then
gosh.
and then she would get mad the times that she didn't want any help. And I had cameras in the house, right? Which, if you are a caregiver, I'm telling you, like, cameras can be a second caregiver, right? They saved my mom's life on multiple times. But she would get mad. I don't need any help. And she would send the caregivers away, and I would have to pay the caregivers anyways. It'd be like the rule.
Wow.
I'd have to tell them all the time, listen, Sally, the caregiver, if you show up and Mom sends you away, I'm still going to pay you. Please just write your hours down, right?
Yeah.
And she'll do that. And she would do that with the night people because she always wanted me there at night, right? And so she would do that, and she would get mad. And then she would take her grabber, and grab a blanket, and she would reach up and she would cover the cameras so I couldn't see him. I mean, she was like,
oh, your mother was shady.
I don't need any help to the extreme. She was just, oh man, here we go. Mom's having a tantrum again. So,
oh wow, yeah. Your mother was a little shady. Wow.
Yeah, she was. It was her rules. I was just, I was just along for the ride.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. We're going to pause for just a minute. My guest has more to share.
In a world where compassion and community are needed more than ever, the International Doula Life Movement presents the Tree of Life Conference. Join IDLM November 1st through the 4th in San Antonio, Texas for an extraordinary experience in end-of-life care. The Tree of Life Conference is not just an event, it's a movement towards making a positive impact. Attendees will hear from expert speakers including award-winning end-of-life educator Barbara Carnes, Lisa Paul of The Death Deck, Brenda Kazire and Nancy Hireman of Odonata Care, and end-of-life advocate Helen Bauer, host of the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Tree of Life Conference is more than just workshops and seminars. It's an opportunity to connect, learn, and renew your commitment to compassionate care. This event is made possible by the team at International Doula Life Movement, who believes in the power of empathy, education, and making a difference in the world. Don't miss out on this transformative experience. Join IDLM at the Tree of Life Conference in San Antonio, Texas from November 1st through the 4th. Visit internationaldoulalifemovement.com for more details and secure your spot today. When you need information about hospice for yourself or someone you care about, Hospice Navigation Services can help you navigate hospice care for the best end-of-life experience possible. If you're walking this journey and need the help of an experienced guide, Hospice Navigation Services is here for you. We understand the importance of having a guide who can provide personalized, unbiased support. Our team of experienced hospice navigators is here to offer one-on-one consulting sessions by phone or video. Whether you need information about how to start hospice services or guidance for your current services, we're here to listen and provide compassionate support every step of the way. You can book a 30-minute free navigation session with an experienced hospice navigator when you need general information to start your hospice experience. Book a 60-minute hospice navigation session when you have in-depth questions about hospice or need to troubleshoot your current hospice care. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life care. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. Visit theheartofhospice.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
You touched on hospice.
Yeah.
Tell me about your hospice experience.
Well, it was very different than what I thought it was going to be. So me and Mom, first of all, there was a time that they thought my mom was going to pass. And we were on palliative care, which if you don't know what palliative care is amazing. It's a step before hospice. It's wonderful if you're able to get it, right? We were on palliative care and we thought it might be time for hospice. And what some people don't know is you have a choice between what hospice team you choose, right? In a lot of areas, in many areas, you have a choice. And we had this one hospice team come in to explain hospice to my mother. And the way they explained it to my mother was they're right, technically, like, because my mother asked a question. So, like, if I just choke on a cookie, you're just going to stand there and let me die? And the lady was like, well, yeah, we'll like rub your arm, so you're comforted while you're doing that. But we can't call the ambulance or help you or anything. And Mom's like, I'm choking on a cookie and you're going to let me die? And she's like, get out of my house. And we were never allowed to say hospice again. Like, I think my mom instantly healed herself, right? Because that was like in 2018 or 19 or something like that. And then we had tried everything. And it was November of 2022. And what I thought hospice was going to be, I was paying at this time about $3,000 a month in care and trying to work full time. And so it was November and we had tried everything. And I said, and my mom's body, all of a sudden, her left side below the waist wasn't working either. And she couldn't get out of bed. And but we would now need two people to change her diaper and to bathe her. And And it wasn't feasible, and I said, we can go to the hospital, Mom, one last try. And me and my mother had a lot of end of life talks. We had talked a lot about what was going to happen during. We had talked about what her wishes were. We had talked about some of the things that she wanted to give away. There were multiple times that I said, Mom, why don't you give them to the kids now so you can see the joy in their face? And we had done a lot of that stuff. And we had talked about what life was going to be like for me after she passed. I mean, we had so many end of life talks, right? We had a million arguments about because she wanted a dang casket from Costco. And
What? Wait.
Yes. My mother was like, she always wanted the best of everything. Remember, my mother was an aerospace engineer. She was like, she came from poverty. My mother came from poverty, extreme poverty. And then my mother wound up, really having a very upper middle class life that she provided for herself. So we would have this argument all the time about the damn Costco coffin, and I'd be like, Ma, what am I supposed to do? Keep it in the garage? I'm not getting a coffin from Costco, right?
I didn't even know
And
that Costco sold.
They do. They sell coffins. Yes, they sell coffins, right? So,
wow.
anyways, we had a million end of life conversations, including the Costco coffin, right? And
That's
so,
pretty funny.
So we go to the hospital. We try everything. They try anything. But we had this one doctor, and she was amazing. And she said to me, Christina, she said, your mother's actively dying, right? And I said, I know. And she said, it's time for hospice. I said, I know. And it was Thanksgiving Day, and it was actually my birthday. And I said, it's time. Let's do it. And I went in, and I ran to Sherry's, a local restaurant here, and I picked up Thanksgiving meals for me and Mom. We sat and we had Thanksgiving meals in the hospital. And then I put in a call to the chaplain who had always come and prayed with us for multiple years, every hospital visit. Like she knew us by name. And I said to my mom, I said, Mom, it's time. I said, it's time. They tried everything, and it's time for us to start being on hospice. And I said, I called the chaplain. I said, can we do a last prayer? We didn't talk other than that time for a while. We just said, you're just going to have a lot of extra nurses and stuff,
Yeah, you didn't use the word hospice anymore.
Because the H word was bad, because of that one other team. And I made sure to request the other hospice service, right? Yeah. And so the chaplain came in, and she brought this beautiful quilt that all of these volunteers had sewn, these beautiful quilts for people who were going on hospice. And she said a prayer. And that quilt, it was so beautiful. It just reminded me like all the different weird pieces that were put together. Some of them matched and some of them didn't match. And it just reminded me of our caregiver story. All these mixed match things and came together to make something beautiful. And it's all, there's this beautiful moment where we're all three praying together, because it's time. So we go home, and me and Mom, we had this romantic idea of what hospice was going to be. Everything was now going to be paid for. I was not going to have to pay the $3,000 a month. And I was just going to be able to be a daughter. And when Mom passed, I was going to be laying by her side. We were going to be holding hands, and I would say, I love you. And she would say, I love you. And she would take her last breath, and it would be beautiful. And that is not what happened. No. That is not what happened. But there were a lot of amazing things happened. But the first thing that happened was I did get an End of Life Doula. An End of Life Doula I've been working with for a while, actually, because Look, I am a professional in the industry, right? I talk to a lot of professionals in the industry. I partner with a lot of professionals in the industry, but it doesn't matter if even if I wrote the book on hospice, even if I created hospice, I'm watching my mother die.
Right.
I am not going to be thinking logically. And so I need somebody to help me think logically. And the End of Life Doula was able to do that. And the End of Life Doula, I invited her every time, like when the hospice team first came, so she could hear it, because literally what's happening is I'm an intelligent woman, and all I'm thinking is, like I'm processing everything as a 53-year-old woman or 54-year-old woman, whatever I was at that time, but my head's just going, please don't let my mommy die.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so the End of Life Doula is like asking the right questions, and she's actually hearing, because I'm not hearing anything. I'm hearing it, but I'm not listening, if that makes sense. And she's able to talk to me afterwards when I'm asking the same question repeatedly because of anxiety and because of fear, right? And then here I found out that the hospice nurses, they don't replace the caregiver so I can be a daughter. No, actually, there's going to be more care because mom can't get out of bed, right? And there's things that need to happen, and they aren't going to be the ones just giving my mother the comfort meds. I've got to do it, right?
Yep.
And so my expenses went from $3,000 to $6,000 a month, and I'm like, oh my god, what, and I just want to be a daughter. If no, that was a choice, because I wanted to be a daughter in the last month of my mom's life. But we did do some beautiful things. Like I talked to my mom and I said, Mom, at the funeral, everybody's going to say all these nice things, and they're going to give cards and they're going to give flowers. I'm like, I don't need that. I want you to hear all those nice things now. And I want you to see all the flowers and cards now. It's like, do you mind if I let people know? And we start doing some calls, and I let people know that they can send flowers and cards now. And we do some video chats. And she's like, I would love that. And so I put the 911 out to everybody, and, cards and flowers and calls and video calls, like they came to mom rather than me afterwards. Right. And I was so grateful for that. And, you know, family and death do not work well, especially when you're a primary caregiver. I am just one of millions of family caregivers who, after the after the person that you're caring for dies, the family explodes, right? But the hospice experience with my brother and sister was absolutely beautiful. Absolutely. I could not have even dreamed of it being this beautiful. And at one point, my brother's like this big 6'5", like, biker dude, he's and my sister, we had at one point, we had my brother and sister and their partners, like husbands, wives, or whatever. And then all the kids, they all came down for a weekend, and I got a bunch of mattresses from places, borrowed a bunch of beds. I mean, there was beds everywhere in this house, and they stayed the whole weekend, and we had a bunch of prayer time, with mom, and everybody got to say goodbye to mom, and mom got to have a special moment with each one of those grandkids and my brother and sister, right? And while she was lucid, right?
Yeah.
And she was strong, and she was able to say the things she needed to say, and they were able to say. And this is a beautiful thing too, I was able to have the End of Life Doula sit down with all of those family members, even the kids, and they were able to ask things like, what's it going to be like when she dies? Like, what are we able to talk about with her? Like, what if she dies while we're here? Like, what do we do with the body? Like, really tough questions, right? And some of them, like the youngest kid was like 10 years old, and the End of Life Doula was, skilled at explaining that to the 10-year-old as she was, my 50-year-old biker brother. You know what I mean? So for me, I just, anybody who's on a hospice journey, if you have an opportunity to work with the End of Life Doula, it's amazing. So mom was passing around Christmas. So, my brother and sister and everybody left. And, everybody's having a Christmas and I'm here. And my mother, about 4 days before Christmas or whatever, went into an end of life coma. She just basically laid in bed. She didn't open her eyes. She didn't talk. She just breathing like that. Nothing else. Right. And she couldn't swallow. She hadn't eaten for a while. I had to administer the meds myself. So crushing them up and slowly, putting them in her mouth and making sure she doesn't can I tell you like how traumatic that was for me? Like all I could think was like, and I asked the hospice people, like, they call them comfort meds, but it makes them comfortable enough for their body to pass. Let's just call a spade a spade.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was such a trip to be the one to be giving that to my mother. And I knew it was the right thing to do. And I was doing it as it was prescribed, but I didn't want to be the one to give my mom the medication that was going to make her comfortable enough to pass. Even though I wanted her, she was suffering. She was suffering. Mm-hmm. My mom didn't want to be that way. I wanted her to. My belief of God and my belief of heaven is beautiful. My mom's belief of God and heaven is beautiful. And she had loving people waiting for her dogs waiting for her. It was going to be beautiful, much more beautiful than what was going on down here. Right. And so, right. But still, and I remember like the hospice nurse kept saying, I don't know why she's not passing, and she's like, are you giving her the medication at night too? And I was supposed to be giving her 2 doses at night. And I'm like, well, no, because she's sleeping. And she said, well, you have to give her the nighttime medication. Well, I didn't want to be the one to give her the last dose before she died. And there was no way to avoid it. There was no way to flip and avoid it. Right. So she prolonged a little bit. And Christmas Day comes and, I don't know, it'd been a week since I showered.
Lovely.
I think it'd been a week since I changed my clothes. There was no like Christmas decorations up. There was no gifts. There was just my dying mother in the other room. Still hadn't talked in like almost a week, hadn't opened her eyes in almost a week. And caregivers weren't working that day. Obviously, I told them they didn't have to work. And then they were all with their families. And the hospice that was supposed to be on call, I kept saying, all I want is for somebody to come help me change my mom's diaper, and the hospice people said, I said, even though my mom's not really going to the bathroom, it's a dignity thing. So literally all I wanted for Christmas, like my Christmas Day miracle, all I flippin' wanted for Christmas was for somebody to come help me change my mother's diaper, because even though my mom was more of a petite woman, like she was dead weight and it took 2 people. Like all I wanted was for somebody to help me change that damn diaper. And so out of the blue, so there was this woman that we didn't even like have each other's phone number, right? I ran a nonprofit and at the time, and she had donated, like her mother had passed and she donated some stuff, and I went over there, and mom had just gone on hospice at that time. And so we were kind of like, she was talking about her mom passing. I was talking about mom we gave each other a hug, and we were, but again, we're not like friends, right? Well, out of the blue, like she messages me because again, we don't have each other's phone number, right? We're not that close. She messages me on Facebook Christmas morning, which is weird, right? Because we're not that type of friends, right? How are you doing? I'm like, fine. And, she says, are you going to have Christmas dinner? And I'm thinking to myself, no. She's like, can I bring you something? And she had all of her family there, right? And I'm like, oh, you don't have to do that. She's like, no, it's fine. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, man, I'm just trying to figure out who I can get to help me change my mom's diaper. And I was not asking her in any way, shape, or form, right? In any way, shape, or because never would I, right? And she's like, well, I'll come help you. I'm like, oh, no, you can't, no. Anyway, she insisted, right? So she leaves her family, right? She leaves her family And she comes over, brings me some Christmas food, right? And I'm like, I'm sorry for the way I smell and the way I look, and she comes in and she says, I used to do this for my dad, so it's fine. And so we go in there, and even though my mom has not opened her eyes in a week, my mom has not talked in a week, I'm still having conversations with my mom because it's a dignity thing, right? And I feel like she can hear me, right? And again, anytime there would be a new caregiver or somebody introduced new to my mom, there was this 2-week period where my mom would take them through hell week and she would be completely mean, right? So, but anyways, so I take my, friend in Vivian, and Vivian's standing at the end of the bed where my mom can see. I'm standing at the side of the bed, and I say, Mom, this is Vivian. She's here and she's going to help me change your diaper. Mom, of course, doesn't open her eyes. She doesn't sit up. She doesn't participate. Nothing. We just takes 2 people. We change her diaper, and then I cover her up and, okay, Mom, love you. And then me and Vivian go into the other room. Now, as the house is situated, even if we were talking normal, you would not be able to hear the conversation. But my mom was hard of hearing anyways, right? So we're in the kitchen, and me and Vivian are whispering for some reason. I don't know why. It's just us 2 and my mother who's dying in the other room. I don't know why we're whispering. And she's telling me the story about how she had this dream a couple nights prior where she was worried about her dad, and her mom came to her and said to her, baby, it's going to be okay. Baby, it's going to be okay. And out of the blue, my mother, who has not talked in almost a week, starts yelling, Mom, 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 because when she was sick, she would call me Mom instead of Tina, right? I would literally have to tell the hospital staff, if she asked for Mom, she's asking for me. So I'm freaking out. We both go running in there, right? Because she hasn't talked in a week. I'm like, oh my God. And so Vivian's standing at the end of the bed and I'm standing at the side of the bed. My mom sits straight up, opens her eyes, has not done that in a week, looks right at Vivian and says, baby girl, everything's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, baby girl. She closes her eyes and goes back into the end of life coma. She never talked again. And then me and Vivian went into the kitchen and we just held each other and cried. It was like her mom. I think that's literally, I needed a Christmas Day miracle. She needed a Christmas Day miracle. Her mom, who had recently passed, my mom, they somehow had some sort of weird meeting and
some connection
and made it happen.
Yeah.
But it was the most amazing moment ever. So I was supposed to give my mom the comfort meds at 1:00 and 5:00 in the morning. And I kept asking a couple of trusted people, and I kept annoying the, hospice case manager. Are you sure I need to give him at night? Yes. She's in that end of life coma because her body it's fighting it because you won't give her that. Okay. So I finally, we don't know why she's still alive, Christina, right? Because and we think that's why, right? So I finally, on the 26th or whatever, I give her the 1:00 in the morning ones, and I wait. She lives through the night. And okay, on the 27th, I give her the 1:00 in the morning ones. And I wait about an hour and she's fine. And then I give her 5:00 in the morning ones. And I wait about an hour and she's fine. And I think I'm going to go to upstairs and I'm going to close my eyes for a minute. Well, 9:00, the caregiver comes in for the shift, and I said, well, let me check on Mom before you go in there. And I walked in and Mom had died. There is no way. I was literally the one who was assigned to give her the comfort meds, right? And I gave them as prescribed. There was no way I was getting out of whether it was the nighttime meds or the afternoon meds. She was going to die. And if I was on schedule with the meds, I would have given her the last dose before there was no way I was getting out of it, but I wasn't thinking of that. For some reason, I associated with the nighttime, right?
Right.
And I remember before the hospice team said, hey, sometimes the people like to lay with the body. I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not laying with a dead body, right? And I came out and I said, I had this shock look on the face. I said that my mom's dead. My mom's dead. And I said, don't go in there. I said, call hospice. And I went in and I laid next to my mom and I laid with her and I was talking to her. And then hospice came and they got her cleaned up. And as they were wheeling her out, you know, before they took her out, I said, can I have a moment with the body? And I stood over her and I said a prayer and I said, Mom, this is the last time you're going to leave this house. And they took her and that was the end of the hospice journey. She died December 28th of 2022. And sometimes I still think she's going to walk in that door or roll in that door. And what I have to say to any caregiver out there, you're not going to experience just grief. There's a component of it that comes with being a caregiver for a long time. And it's, attached to the almost like the PTSD. It's not diagnosed. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that. But, the things like we were on call 24/7, right? We were on call 24/7 every time our phone rang. And we were always either going into an emergency, coming out of an emergency, recovering from an emergency, or in the middle of an emergency. And when that suddenly stops, and when you suddenly stop being on call 24/7 and the phone rings, it's going to take a while before you think either somebody died or I got to be ready for an emergency when that phone rings. Right. And that's different from grief. And how I know is because my father died unexpectedly and I was not his caregiver, I think 8 months before my mother. Right. And I went through grief counseling, and what I experienced with my father, and my father was I love my father. He was one of my closest friends. Right. And what I experienced with my father and that grief, it's been so different than what I experienced with my mother. I've experienced grief with my mother being gone, but the caregiver, like recovering from being the caregiver, has been brutal. And it's such like being lost, not knowing what my place is, not knowing what my purpose is, not knowing even what I like to do. For 10 years, I put my life on hold. Like everything I did, if I could buy groceries, when I could go to sleep, when I could wake up, who I could hang out with, if I could talk on the phone, if I could go on vacation, like if I wanted to, have a certain type of meal, like everything I did was
if you
based
could
on my
shower.
mother.
Yeah.
If I could shower, like basic life things where I could live, all of these things. And now, what do I do now? And who am I? And now I get to make the decisions for me. Now I feel selfish if I buy myself a damn cup of coffee.
Yeah. It's an identity change.
Right, exactly. And then all of a sudden you've been this badass for like all this time, you've been handling, like, you haven't just survived caregiving. Like, I'm going to tell every caregiver out there, you have not just survived caregiving, and forgive me for saying this, but you have all handled it like a badass, and you are all doing that. You guys are all handling it like a champ, right? Whether you want to admit it or not, I'm going to tell you, you're doing it, right? And you become these incredible people, right? You become these incredibly strong people, right? And then your person dies and you're like, I am not worth anything. They are gone. I have no purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And so you got to completely rediscover yourself. And for some reason, we can't love ourselves the way or care for ourselves the way we loved and cared for that person that we were caring for on that care journey. Right. But what I'm telling you is, if we could even care for ourselves and love ourselves even 10% as much as we cared for them, we've got hope. And even though I still cry, clearly it's okay, right? It's okay. I don't actually cry a lot, right? But I weep and stuff like this. But things are starting to get better. Beautiful things are starting to happen in my life, and this is the life that my mom and I talked about, the life that I promised her I would live, right? We had plans after she passed for me. So
and you're creating such meaning with the work that you're doing. So we're close to being finished. We all want to close, but I want to talk about caregiving.com because that's the organization you're working with. That's how you and I got connected. Your story really has driven the work that you're doing. Tell me about caregiving.com. How are you guys supporting caregivers, and how can my listeners access the resources you guys have?
Yeah, caregiving.com. I am so blessed to be able to work there. I love the work I get to do. I was completely lost in the reason why I got the diagnosis of like you have 6 months to live in 2017 is because I was trying to figure it out all on my own. I was living in a town that I thought there was no resources. I had to leave my career. I went into the senior and retirement industry, found there was hundreds of resources in my town. So I wound up creating a hyper local model of a nonprofit. And then caregiving.com approached me after Loving Them Forward, the nonprofit I created and used to run, got some national recognition. They approached me and said, hey, how would you like to duplicate this model all across the United States? And so that's what we do. So we've got a wonderful digital platform. The digital platform has everything from, information, articles, videos, trainings, seminars, like all kinds of information, podcasts, stories. But one of the beautiful things we have is the champions. And the champions are basically current or former family caregivers who are spread throughout the United States, who are standing up and aligning with caregiving.com's mission of making positive changes for family caregivers, giving the family caregivers a voice, and being able to let them redefine normal. And, we have the podcast, Champions Corner, Real Talk with Real Caregivers. And we are going into my whole job is I travel all over the United States building family caregiver support communities. So I show up in a town, I rally up all the local resources. I explain to them, hey, this is how many family caregivers are in your town. This is how you work together. This is how you help them. And I empower them. I engage them. So when I leave that town, the work doesn't stop. That community grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And, I'm able to do that. I'm also able to speak all over and share my story, share mine and my mother's story. And that makes it so, my mom's story, my mom still gets to stay alive through that story. So
she's still living large through this. Yeah.
Yes. And people can find caregiving.com. Just simply go to caregiving.com. We're also hiring champions. We're also asking for people to be part of that mission for a positive change for family caregivers. So if you are a current or former family caregiver, you can reach out to champions at caregiving.com, or you can go to caregiving.com or simply text 360-230-7736. And you can become a champion, and you can work with me and the hundreds of caregiving.com champions we have across the United States.
Christina, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your resources, but thank you so much for sharing your story. Your mom would be so proud of the work that you're doing. I'm so glad you're out there doing this.
I'm honored that I get to do it. I get to do this, Helen.
Be sure to catch the next episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast. You can find more episodes on theheartofhospice.com, and don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can connect with the Heart of Hospice podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and send your questions or comments by email to helen@theheartofhospice.com. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.